I've heard a lot from artists is that spread art provides them a space to create without the fear of failure. That is something I've heard multiple times, and I just think it's so important to have a space like that.
Welcome to the Commonwealth, lively and informative conversations with changemakers and thought leaders, from grassroots leaders to policymakers, about what's actually working to build fair, thriving urban communities in Detroit and beyond. I'm your host, Dana Thompson. When people think of community development, efforts such as affordable housing and job training programs often come to mind, not the arts. My guest is Professor Shiva Shahmir. She's a Wayne State University professor in the music technology program, a first generation Iranian American artist, creative organizer, and frequency practitioner in the fields of music, internet, and radio. She's also the president of Spread Art, a Detroit nonprofit that offers space for the community to collaborate, exhibit, experiment, experience, perform, practice, and organize cultural activities such as art, dance, music, and storytelling. Shiva, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have such a diverse creative background with music technology and studio recording, sound engineering. And I thought it was really interesting that you talked about yourself as a frequency practitioner. I haven't heard that term, so can you tell us what does that mean?
At some point in my life, I realized that I was working with a lot of frequencies, whether it was radio broadcasting. In Detroit, I worked with the Equitable Internet Initiative, installing community internet for a while, noticing working with fixed wireless frequencies again. And music is made up of frequencies entirely itself. When I'm painting or doing art, the light includes frequencies. And when I'm documenting or whatnot, I think a lot of truth lies between the fluctuations between positive and negative, and that is frequency, right? How frequently do we shift between those two things? So it became the common thread for somebody like me who feels like I'm doing a lot of different things, right? And a lot of the times people ask me, like, what is your medium, right? And sometimes I would feel very insecure, like, I'm not just a painter, or I'm not just like, I don't have one thing to point to. But when I came across this, you know, commonality, it really created a sense of purpose and identity in a way that I hadn't been able to name before.
Oh, wow. That's really such an interesting understanding who you are and the work that you do. What influenced you to engage in creative work and the community?
The world changed a lot for my parents in their 20s. They, in a way that maybe a lot of 20-year-olds right now feel the world is shifting for them in the United States. And so when they got married, they chose to not have a child until they could come to the United States, which took 10 years and a lot of, visa rejections, attempts, and whatnot. But finally, they made it through. They also really wanted to have a daughter after they saw the things that had happened in Iran. And they didn't want to have a daughter in Iran under the regime that they saw came into power. My father was, loved drumming, music. They both loved music. They are both, deep appreciators of the arts and culture. And they saw a lot of that stripped from their world in those 10 years before they were able to come to the United States. Western instrumentation was removed. We were not allowed to play. So my dad was like a drum set player. And so he had to move to like more like cultural instrumentations because that was Western. When they came here, they really empowered me to be able to live my life in a way that I wouldn't have been able to in Iran. And a lot of what I do, honestly, I would probably be persecuted in Iran for. And uh, while that is like really difficult to carry, it's also, um, it gives me purpose as well because I know I have privileges that I would not have had if my parents were not able to leave. And so anything regarding organizing and arts and whatnot is something that I will always continue to strive to preserve and facilitate and encourage, because that's something that there are parts of the world you cannot do.
Thank you for sharing about your parents and your experience. So, how did you end up coming to Detroit?
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated with Detroit because my parents learned how to speak English through Motown, and especially
Mm.
Stevie Wonder. They would take these underground English classes in Iran at the time before they were able to immigrate, and their homework was to translate Stevie Wonder lyrics. And it gave them a depth to the English language that I don't think any other sort of textbook could have given them. But to them, the visuals and the culture they were observing coming out of Detroit Motown was symbolic of America, was the American dream that they were coming out for? And so as I was growing up and seeing the news about Detroit, there was a dissonance between what they regarded it as. It felt like if I was gonna be in the United States, I wanted to be in the heart of both the culture, but also the heart of where I could contribute in an impactful way. Detroit is now the longest place I've lived in. And so really seeking for a home, I guess, in some ways too. So it made sense, and so I applied for a residency, an artist residency in Detroit at Spread Art in 2016. It was a time where I knew I wanted to go in this direction of running a community space eventually, that was multidisciplinary, had studios, gallery, theater, but I wanted the experience as an artist first.
You are now the president and the director. So, how did that happen? Tell us the story about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'll try to keep it short because it can get long.
Okay. Okay.
But I come in November of 2016 as an artist in residence,
Mhm.
and it's a very fragile time for this organization that I was not aware of when I arrived. So I thought I'm coming in and I'm going to really focus on my art for once. I've always been behind the scenes. But this time I was like, I'm going to be just an artist.
Mhm.
And that was not the case. I came in and immediately was asked to help with various parts of the organization. And I'm somebody who's inclined to do that naturally anywhere I go. And so, like I said, the organization was in a really fragile state. And there was a lot of people who did not want to associate anymore with the directors at the time. The director that was still there when I arrived had come to Detroit in 2012 from New York, was, a time when a lot of New York artists were actually looking to Detroit because they were the gentrification that they were experiencing in neighborhoods like Bushwick,
Mhm.
where Spread Art was actually first founded, like, was located.
Okay.
So they came out in 2012, but by the time it was, like, 2016, it was just him living in this organization, out of the organization. And the board was absent, the board of directors, and the community was pretty absent too.
Really?
It was just international artists mostly coming in, staying
Oh,
for a month, working on a project, maybe leaving. Sometimes
okay.
2 weeks at a time.
Were there many local artists who
No.
were there at the time? Okay.
No, there would be
Mm,
some events and whatnot that,
okay.
like, you would see
Mhm.
local artists come through for.
Mhm.
One side of the building at the time was an apartment. I've now
Mhm.
converted those apartment rooms into studios as well. It turned out that it was not sustainable to continue to have people live in that building. At that time, people would come in, live on one side of the building, have studios on the other side, and then be able to exhibit or perform downstairs.
Okay.
So that was the context of which I arrived, and then by June 2017, the director that I'm speaking of had to resign.
Okay.
Um, and there was nobody who wanted to step in because this organization and space had grown so isolated from the community. And there was a lot of harm this person had done too in the community in a way that people did not want to
Right.
associate. So
Right.
I was in an interesting position where I knew the value of a community space because I had also experienced gentrification in other cities and seen these spaces be taken away from communities and artists who really needed them. That's like the core canvas that most artists need is just a space to develop and incubate their work to get to that gallery or get to that stage. And so there was this fork in the road where I was like, well, clearly this organization is not being supported. So do we dissolve this organization or do we save it because it owns this building? Because if you dissolve an organization, right, in the state of Michigan or anywhere in the United States, you have to liquidate your assets, either
Right.
to the state or transfer it to another nonprofit. So the first thing I actually tried to do was communicate and talk to a lot of other nonprofits to see, do you want this building? Before I like try to invite a new board of directors in,
Mhm.
and reestablish this organization, should this just go into capable hands? This is a
Right.
very old building. This building's from 18, what is it, 89 or something like that.
Really?
So
It's a historic building.
it's a very historic
Mm.
it's probably the last from that era between Warren and 94 on
Okay.
Rosa Parks, 12th in
Okay.
Detroit. And if you know 12th, that's where the rebellion
That's right. Yeah, the
happened too.
1967 rebellion
Yeah, so it's
happened
a
in that area. Mhm.
exactly. So we're right now one of like maybe two buildings on our block, and the
Okay.
blocks around us are also vacant at
Okay.
this point. At that time, I had put in $2,000 just to get the organization out of debt,
Of
and
your own money.
of my own money,
Oh, wow.
because when I stepped into the role of president, I started getting DTE letters saying we were behind, our insurance was behind. We had grants that I had to report for that I didn't know where the money had gone to. It was a really tough situation, especially for a
Yes.
25-year-old who just arrived in Detroit.
To be an artist in residence, not to take over this organization. Wow.
Yes. So as I spoke to multiple organizations, it was too much of a liability for them.
Mm,
And
okay.
I was stuck with, okay, so again, do I dissolve this and does this just get liquidated at the state? If no nonprofit wants it, is it just going to become a brewery or something like that?
Mhm. Right.
Or
Right.
do I actually try to make something happen? Like try to sustain this space?
Mhm.
But again, being new to Detroit, I wasn't about to come in and say, this is what the space is going to be. This is the new and
Yeah.
improved spread art. I did not want to prescribe my vision to the
Right.
space. I wanted to facilitate a space where the community could prove whether it was needed or not.
Okay.
So if the community were to show up and I was to provide accessible rates that just sustain the building, no paid
Mhm.
staff, nothing
Mhm.
else, just
Mhm.
literally so we can pay the utilities, insure the space, have internet, buy toilet paper, just minimum. So in the beginning, it was you could get 10 hours of access to the space, become a key holder for $100, $10 an hour.
Pretty good deal.
So that's how we started. It was like, okay, let's see. And I was willing to pass out these keys. I mean,
Okay.
nobody had been that protective of this space up until now. So why was I going to show up and be like
Right. That's
territorial?
right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, how did you engage with the community? I mean, I know the idea of having key holders,
Yeah.
but as you said, you're new to Detroit.
Hmm.
So, how did you actually find people in the
Yeah.
community to let them know this is the new vision for spread art?
Yeah. We publicized community public meetings and as soon as I took it on to just see like what
Okay.
does the community see in this space? What
Hmm.
needs to is this like a very strong or umbrella organization for programming, or is this organization really just a platform for what the community wants and needs to see? And so a lot came out in those meetings, and a lot of people came out. I feel like we had a few of them, probably five,
Right. So, what were their ideas?
because the space had become so sequestered to the more international national community for
Right.
residencies. They just really wanted to see Detroiters in
Mm.
the space.
Yeah,
So that was
absolutely.
my goal, was how do I make this accessible to actual Detroiters? And
Okay.
that's why the rates were really important to keep at a minimum to the point where it's just covering expenses for the building.
Okay.
It's not like you're paying my paycheck. Why didn't you pay for it? It's like very much honor system. We're all taking care of this building together when we're contributing in this way. So
Mhm.
um, we spoke about Motown, and it's interesting. If you do a Motown museum tour, they'll talk about Berry Gordy talking to his artists about Do you want this recording or do you want the sandwich?
Hmm.
Like, which one are you more hungry for the sandwich? Then go eat the sandwich. Or do you
Right.
want and so I kind of was inspired by that. And so I was like, okay, what's the cheapest sandwich I can get?
Hmm.
What's the most expensive sandwich I could get?
Meet people where they are.
Yes, yeah.
So it was determined then by the community that it was still going to be primarily an art focus space.
Yes.
But there are other things that are happening there. There are other community gatherings. I know Woodbridge has had
Mhm.
community gatherings
They're a
there.
key holder, the Woodbridge
They're a key
neighborhood.
holder.
Yeah. So they're a
Okay.
key holder.
Okay.
Outlier Media with the documentaries program, they're a key holder.
Yeah. Okay.
They manage their bookings. They hold that space themselves, and
Okay.
the glory of it is like, so I'm not having to be around for most. I'm not getting paid for 9 years. I'm a volunteer. I have
We're
three other jobs. Yeah, I've never gotten paid. I'm a president of the board. I'm not even an executive director. I took that role. We have no executive director because we don't have money to pay an executive director. And for me to be an executive director meant that I would have to be controlled by a board of directors. And that
right.
felt a little weird when I'm not getting paid.
Right.
So
That's right.
I was like, okay, I'll be the president of the board.
Okay.
Presidents typically don't get
Get
paid.
paid. That's right. That's
So
right.
yeah, I typically have 2 to 3 other jobs to sustain myself.
Okay.
And then that's, as people like to call it, my passion project. But
Right.
for me, honestly, if that could be my full-time job, that would be my dream. But it's difficult. So like part of keeping the space sustainable and within capacity is that I keep the organization under $50,000 a year in
Okay.
budget because the accounting and reporting requirements above $50,000, we don't have the capacity. I don't have the money to
Right.
pay an auditor. The audit
Right.
would be like a quarter of our budget right now itself.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make any sense. Lots of grants, for operations, they require that you are a organization of over $100,000
Mm,
annually.
okay.
We're not. And so
Right.
we're in this weird spot where it's like either we have to make a lot more money and become very dependent on grants,
Mhm.
or we continue just being run by the community. And there's a
Right.
resilience in that. We saw the pandemic come through. Lots of
Mhm.
organizations had to shut down. When
Mhm.
funding gets cut, lots of places have to lay off people.
Yeah.
We haven't had to do that because we've always been volunteer
Okay.
run. So there is a resilience in that because nothing has changed when the world has changed
That's
around
right.
us.
What are some of the remarkable stories or the people that you've encountered in doing this work that come to spread art?
One of the first artists in residence, he's a spoken word artist, poet. His name's Walter Lacey. And he was very involved in this transition. And having him come through and walking around the neighborhood, that was very important to me,
Mhm.
was that the programming and what was happening in the space would be reflective of Detroit. That would not have been a success to me for there to be a lot of events, but for it to not demographically represent where we are located. In those community meetings, that was the number one thing I heard was that there were all these opportunities for these outsider artists coming in, but what about the people in Detroit who need a space to get to, like I said before, the next level, just to
Right.
incubate, develop, gather, organize. So yeah, Walter Lacey was incredible with just opening my eyes to the wider neighborhood and then also how he focused his work during his residency on the neighborhood and the stories of the people he grew up with and everything. And having that community come into the space for one of the first like residency showcases we did after I took on spread art was one of the most moving moments. It wasn't a entirely, like, packed house, but still, it was very representative of what I was hoping to, see in the space more and more.
What a gift.
Yes. Something also that is I've heard a lot from artists is that spread art provides them a space to create without the fear of failure.
Mm.
That is something I've heard multiple times, and I just think it's so important to have a space like that.
Absolutely. So most of the artists now are people who live in Detroit or people who live in the neighborhood, would you
Correct.
say? In
Yes.
Detroit or
Yes,
okay,
Detroit.
that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
all of our residents, and it's eclectic right now. We have musicians who have studios, we have visual artists, we've had photographers who have studios. We have a very strong jazz community right now out of spread art.
Okay.
It's incredible. They talk of a time that their mentors have spoken of where there were, late night jazz jams across the city that union musicians could go to.
Right.
And there aren't those places anymore unless you're actually gigging. And
Right.
so, yeah, seeing this new generation of jazz musicians develop out of spread art is incredible. And we'll have these jams, they go quite late. And it'll be like 2 a.m. and Dwight Adams walks in, who's like plays for Stevie Wonder. And I'm
Wow.
sitting there going like, "Wait, what?" Like, Dwight Adams is just jamming with some Wayne State College students right now at 2
Yes.
in the morning at
Yes.
Spread Art. Yeah, incredible moments. Or I'll hear of, like, Kareem Riggins just stopped by this jam in the middle of the night. Like, "Wait,
Wow.
what? You mean the resident artist for the Detroit Jazz Fest was just there, like, hanging out?" And
Yes.
it's open to everybody. So we have all ages showing up, all experience levels showing up, and to see that cross-pollination happen with experience,
Right.
just yeah,
That's
again,
remarkable. That's remarkable, but that is so symbolic of Detroit, this place that has created these brilliant artists. So what does a week of activities look like at Spread Art? What are some of the things that are happening?
poetry, you have hip hop, you have dance, all sorts of things, and yeah, that's been our most consistent programming every other Sunday.
Okay.
But yeah, you have a queer community that's coming through the space now, doing a lot of different events, reading groups. I would love to see more visual artists out of the
Okay.
space. We've had ebbs and flows with that, but it's very much leaned towards music, I feel like, in the
Okay.
most recent past, and community organizing.
Okay.
But a lot of people will tell me like, "Oh, do you wish you had more programming?" And oftentimes it'll be because they're part of one community in Detroit that uses the space, but they're not necessarily aware of all the other communities in Detroit that also use the space.
Right.
So I'm like, "Well, you're here for the hip hop show tonight, but last night there was a punk show,
Right.
and the other night there was jazz." It's not that these communities within the space are always intermingling with one another. There still might be some separation, but the beauty I see in that is that each of those communities still finds home in their own way in that space. It becomes a blank canvas for each of those. So it's not
Right.
necessarily one big spread art community, I would say, but yeah, we have a lot of different communities.
That have come together. That's wonderful. You have been a part of so many organizations and communities. And you've also talked about the notion of social sculpture.
Yes.
What is that? What is that concept?
It was first brought up to me by a good friend and somewhat mentor, an artist, Tom Bros, who looked at me one day, and he's 86 right now,
Mm,
and so he lived through the 60s and 70s, and he had become familiar with this notion of social sculpture that I
mm,
hadn't heard of. But
mhm.
yeah, at one point he looked at me and he said, "I think I've figured out your medium." And this was after searching for my medium for so long, like I
Right,
said earlier, like, "Am I a
right.
painter this? Am I just a sound engineer?"
Mhm.
He's like, "You're a social sculptor." And as I've been involved with spread art, it's come more and more to light how relevant that term is because spread art is my social sculpture. Like, I have not had the time in the same way to create how I hoped when I came to Detroit, but in other ways, as seeing spread art as my art practice,
Mhm.
yeah, it's performance experimental art in its own way. It's architecture, all these it
Yes.
has and the way people interact and engage and navigate, all those things, I see as an art form. So it's helped with the sacrifice of not being able to create in a visual media necessarily, uh, while making the art process, like, fulfilling. Because sometimes as an artist, you're like, "Who's gonna see my work?
Mhm.
Is it
Mhm.
is it actually doing anything,
Mhm.
like sometimes you feel good, people receive it, great, but like
Yeah.
what then? And
Right.
so to have an art project that takes the next level and actually
Yes.
impacts people's daily lives, like is yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
The
what more transformative art project could you have than spread art, which is creating so many opportunities for artists in Detroit and so many other people to come together. So, one last question I want to ask is how people can get involved in your work, how people can support your work.
Yeah. So our website, spreadart.org, has our booking application and studio applications.
Okay.
And if we don't have studios and you fill out an application, you're on the wait list. And for bookings, if the calendar, which is also available on our website, is open, we typically book it, and make it happen. Either a volunteer will help with facilitating someone coming through to use the space, or you become a key holder, as we have many key holders to the space. So anything that you need space for that falls within our mission, which I tried to make as broad as
Mhm.
possible, as you probably noticed.
Yep.
Experiment, exhibit, perform, you know?
Right. Right.
So
Whatever you can
collaborate.
do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
really wanted something that could embrace all forms of community. And so if you need space, definitely hit us up, fill out that booking form, and we'll provide that for you.
Thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you.
Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your creativity and bringing all of these communities together, bringing people together. It's really inspiring to see the work that you're doing. And we're so thankful you're
Thank
here in
you.
Detroit to do this work for the community.
I'm grateful to be here and to be received.